I'm Taryn Rosenkranz, and this is Political TrailMix, where strategy meets storytelling, and every episode unpacks the people, power, and politics shaping our country. Let's dig in. Thank you for coming here today. I'm Taryn Rosenkranz, and each week I'm going to bring a different friend with me from my days in Democratic politics. And today I have with me Lucinda Guinn, who is joining me. I'm going to let her introduce herself, tell you a little bit about her. But I know her from my days at the DCCC, the Democratic House Party Committee that is dedicated to electing more Democrats to the House. But I'm going to let her tell her a little bit about herself, and then we're going to jump right in. We're going to discuss everything under the sun, which I think is going to make it so much fun. Next time we're going to actually do this with wine, I think. Maybe something, coffee, something, I don't know. But
I would
today
like
we're just going to do
wine.
it from our offices. But we're going to let her tell you a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Taryn. It is great to be with you today for your inaugural episode. I'm so excited to have this conversation. My name is Lucinda Guinn. I am a Democratic media consultant. I have a firm called Ralston Lapp Guinn Media. And most of my career I've spent working on campaigns and on the road. I've worked on campaigns from Virginia to California and lots of states in between. In my heart, I still consider myself a campaign manager. But I met Taryn during my second tour of duty at the DCCC, and we got to spend some very good times working together that cycle. And then I went to the LGBTQ Victory Fund, where I was the political director, and then was tapped by Emily's List to go over there. I spent the better part of almost 3.5 cycles. I was there running the campaigns department, which means I oversaw the federal and gubernatorial team as well as the state and local team, rather, at Emily's List, which was such a core part of who I am and the missions and the work that I love to do. I then left Emily's List to go for my third tour of duty at the DCCC, where I served as the executive director in the 2020 election cycle before opening my firm. So here we are. I'm excited for the conversation.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. And all those tours of duty, and we do call them tours of duty because if you've ever worked in Democratic politics, they are a little bit of a tour of duty, which actually kind of brings us to our next question, because everything is a tour of duty nowadays, because it's been a little bit of a rough year for Democrats, I will say. And so we want to talk a little bit about that. And so we're going to do that. The best way to explain it is a pretty crappy year for Democrats. But I do want to kind of talk about the fact that I think we were saying earlier when we were chatting before we got started that, this could be a little bit of hope in the House. We don't always say that, but there's actually a very slim margin right now for Democrats. Like, we could actually take this back, which, let's not jinx anything. I just knocked on wood. I'm very superstitious. Most political operatives are. We all have our rituals. But I do want to say, I think there's a lot of places where there's actually some opportunity. And I know you know it, and we know it, and we work on these, that there are places where they can be under the radar. There are places where, Trump underperformed, despite the fact that it was not victorious at the end of the day for Kamala Harris. There were places where, Democrats actually did well that night. I know there were for our clients. So I'm just curious your take. Let me hear what you're thinking, if you feel the same or if you think I'm delusional. Some people do.
Absolutely, Taryn. Look, it has been a rough year. I mean, for America, I think it's just, the impacts that the Trump administration, from Elon Musk with the chainsaw to this horrible tax and frankly slashing Medicaid bill that is in process in the House right now, is devastating for Americans. But, I do think there is a clear path to Democrats winning the House. There's a longstanding tradition of the non-presidential party winning control of Congress in the midterms. And I think this will be no different. And I think, you'll start to see, you already see a lot of momentum with folks that are stepping up to run that are kind of not traditional candidates, which is a lot of, frankly, what we saw in 2017 and 2018 in the kind of backlash to Trump's first election. I think you're seeing a lot more kind of citizen candidates stand up. And that is, I think, very exciting as we look at our House map. So look, I think the first job of Democrats has got to be to shore up our incumbents. And we do have some incumbents that are in tough races. You have Marie Gluesenkamp Perez in Washington State, Amelia Sykes, Adam Gray in the Central Valley of California. He won his race. He was the last race of the 2024 election cycle to be called. He won by 187 votes. So there's
Crazy.
some work that we need to go do to make sure that we're shoring folks like that up. But the opportunity on this map is good, and we have reasons to be optimistic, right? There's in the state of Arizona, you have David Schweikert in the Phoenix area. The guy has multiple ethics violations.
Mhm.
He literally used taxpayer dollars to go to the Super Bowl. He votes with the right wing of his party. You have Juan Ciscomani in the Tucson area. Juan Ciscomani is someone who he's a Republican who he likes to play a moderate on TV, but he's actually like he is part of an organization called the Patriot Academy, which is this extreme right-wing organization that, of course, is anti-choice, is incredibly evangelical religious. They also are preparing for a coming war. And so they are like,
Right.
they do these militia style trainings. It's crazy. It's crazy. They do these like militia style trainings where they train kids as young as 11 years old to prepare for the coming war. Like, he is
Sure.
as far right as they come, but he presents as a moderate. So, it puts up this facade that I think we have to break through in order to take him down. But he's absolutely, this is one of the closest elections we had in the last two election cycles was in this district. So that's another one to keep an eye on. You have in Michigan, you have a couple of really competitive seats. John James has had one of his closest reelections, or two of his closest reelections in the
And
last two
say, I think
cycles.
the last two, right? Yeah.
Yep, totally. He's running for governor now. So the seat is open. And look, not to speak ill of people, but, I think he had a pretty flawed Democratic nominee running against him the last two cycles. So now there will be a primary with some really cool, interesting candidates on our side, as well as on the Republican side. They're going to have to duke it out to figure out who's going to be their nominee. So I think the state of Michigan just presents additional opportunities. So I could go on and on. I will stop so we don't have a 2-hour podcast. But I think there's lots of reasons to be optimistic, and it lives in some swing states like Arizona and Michigan, and also some places like California, New York, Washington State. Like, there are places where we need to go do work that are not traditional swing states.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally right. And I think the path is definitely there. And if we go back and we look at these other non-presidential years, there's always more opportunity there in the non-presidential years for sure. And I think all of those, I mean, those are such extreme stories. It's like scary. This is scary stuff, very scary stuff. I do think one of the things that, happened last cycle in 2024, we talk in cycles. I apologize, like, to anyone outside of like the political operative world. They're like, cycles, what are you talking about? So we'll talk years for a second. I'll say 2024, one of the big wins, and we worked on them here at New Blue where I work, but I think you worked on some too, and you definitely did when you were at Emily's List. But a lot of big things happened last year with the ballot initiatives with abortion, and I think that was just very exciting. And I know, we just had so much amazing progress after having this heartbreaking loss with everything that did happen. And I'm just, kind of curious if you think that abortion will be sort of a key part of the dialogue again in 2026, if we think that this is going to be something that is probably part of every election. I don't know. I'm just so curious of your take, since you had such an important role at Emily's List, and because of who you are, I'm just really want to hear your expertise and take on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us would love for women's rights and abortion rights to get shored up, and we thought they were for
Right.
years.
Right.
And so, the Dobbs decision, which undid Roe v. Wade, um, has had really rippling effects throughout the country. And so you've seen that show up in ballot measures across the country where we've had tremendous success. And I think we'll continue to see, where we haven't had them yet and where we're able to get them on the ballot, I think we'll continue to see abortion rights ballot measures pop up. They are a driver, I think, of turnout for us. I think they really do. And the success in what are frankly tough states sometimes really shows that America is truly pro-choice, right? America does believe in women's rights to have their own reproductive freedom and take care of themselves. So I think you'll continue to see that at the ballot measure level. And I don't know how it completely goes away in this kind of post Roe v. Wade world we live in inside of our elections. There are very far right members of Congress and members of the Senate who would like nothing more than to ban abortion nationally. And that will impact women, even in blue states, if that were to happen. I think you've seen um, our personal freedoms be attacked under this administration in so many ways, from the Trump administration threatening to send US citizens to prisons in El Salvador to threats against the LGBTQ community.
Right.
And women's rights are still under attack. So I think you'll continue to see our rights and our freedoms in every way show up at the ballot box.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so crazy because the way it impacts like everybody in just different ways about how they're addressing their everyday lives. Like I can't imagine it not being at the ballot box. Like I was just hearing people talk the other day where they were saying about their kids choosing colleges and they're like, well, I'm not going to send my kid to a college in Texas and I was like, what? Like really? I mean, yes, but yes, right? Like I was suddenly like, oh, of course. Like I like wouldn't even have thought that in my head, but yeah, okay. And then like a friend was telling me that they were driving in their first trimester, like back to their home in Illinois, and they didn't want to drive through Indiana for fear something would happen. I know I'm like getting emotional as she's telling me this
Yes.
story because she's so fearful she'll get in a car accident and something would happen and she would have to be in a hospital and be faced with this horrible choice. And I'm like, practically spilling tears down my face. I'm like, are you serious? This is so horrible. And the child not being able to go to like this wonderful college that she wants to go to. And I'm thinking, oh my God, is this going to be something that we're all faced with? And then like my mom and her friends and everybody thought they fought for this and they like did it. And like we're all like, I know you were at the Emily's List Gala the other day and like we all
Mhm.
are like sitting there. It's like 40 years and you're like, yay. But like also like the like heartbreak of this like wait we're here again like full circle didn't go anywhere like
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so
I think, our mothers and grandmothers fought for these rights so that
I
we would
know
have to. And here we are again. It's devastating to women all over the country and just as scary for women in California and
oh
New
my
York and like kind of traditionally blue states as we have this really extreme right-wing Congress. So
God.
I just don't see a world in which it's going to not be a topic that we talk about until actually women have the rights that we deserve.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think we all are like sitting here, and I know you and I, like when I wanted to do this podcast, is because I said there are so many of my friends who are sitting in states or are sitting just as political operators, and we're all like, what do we do to do like people don't know what to do. And if you're not a political operative, you really don't know what to do, right? So I do feel like this is I want to give people hope. We talked about this at the beginning, but I also want like people to understand there are things you can do because these midterms are that important, right? Like these midterms are a way for people to the House is really, really important because like you said, this far right Republican Congress, like every seat actually does matter. Like, right?
Really
Because
does.
like it really does matter. Like these ballot initiatives matter, but like every level of government matters. Like it really is that critically important.
Yeah.
Totally. I just when you were DCCC executive director, see, we're talking about hope. I'm going to go back to hope. I'm going back to cheerfulness here for a
We
second.
can have
As
hope.
we were
Let's have
like,
hope.
yeah, yeah, but it was also a tough time, and you were there at like COVID and just these like really unique time, but it was also a victorious time, and I'm curious if there was some recipe for success or one thing that you thought made a difference or that was helpful towards victory or towards like expanding the map or getting into some of these places. I was thinking if there was anything that we're thinking about this, in that context that you think, we should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think there is a kind of three-part strategy that we followed
Mhm.
that I think can be and is being replicated, just to be clear.
Yeah.
I think a lot of folks really believe in this, but to me, I think we did a very good job of doing three things. Number one, we worked very hard to shore up our incumbents in the off year. And that looks like a lot of things. That can look like shoring up their field operation, making sure that money is coming in the door and they are well-funded operations, making sure they're staffed properly. And those are all things you can do before voters are ever paying attention, right? You can do those things in January, February, March, April of the off year before you get into the election year. And that is such a critical piece of it. I mentioned, Adam Gray in the Central Valley before, who won by 187 votes. He's doing a tremendous job right now inside of his campaign, but it'll always be tough. So there will just be some of those seats that'll always be tough. So you have to make sure they have all the tools they need to take care of what they can, and that there is budget to take care of them as like the institutions, as the party has the budget to take care of those folks. So I think that's step one. Step two is the core battlefields. And those are kind of the pickup opportunities across the country. There's a handful of seats where Republicans are sitting right now in districts that Joe Biden won. There's also seats that Republicans are sitting in that Trump won by the narrowest of margins. And so, I think the D-Trip put out a really comprehensive list of about 35 of those core districts across the country that are that should be a real focus. This is where it is the party committee's job to go in, recruit really strong candidates, help them build strong campaigns. Like, it is all about fundamentals. I know that's not the sexy, fun, we're going to test this new fun technology, digital stuff, but like, campaigns are still campaigns. They have to have fundamentals that are strong. We have to have strong candidates. They have to be well funded. They have to have strong staffs that can help them stand up a strong operation so they can see what's coming. So that's part two, right? It's like, how are we going to flip the seats? And then there's part three, which is expanding the battlefields. And this is something that in the 2020 cycle, I think we did really well. I think across the board, frankly, everyone, Republicans, Democrats, everyone underestimated what Trump on the ballot was going to do to turnout. And so when we expanded the map into places like Arkansas and tough districts in Texas, places like that, what we were doing is we were forcing Republicans to chase us with their money and investment to go shore up members that were their incumbents, right? Yeah. That we said, we see you and we're coming for you. And what that does is it does two things. One, if there is a wave and like the sales are up, it is going to help get so many more Democrats over the finish line. So that's the first thing it does. The other thing it does is it helps prevent spending against otherwise kind of endangered incumbents. Like, by us going and putting races on the map in Texas and in Arkansas, we made sure folks didn't spend against Lauren Underwood in Illinois, who has a tough district in Illinois. And that was super helpful to us being able to maintain the majority that cycle. So those are the three steps that I know are not sexy, but they are critical to us doing to be able to hold on to the seats that we have and to flip a few more.
I have found in all the years I've been doing this that the least sexy things are what win races.
Totally. I mean, if you're like in the NFL, I'm the worst person to make a sports analogy. Like, it's silly that I'm doing this, but
I'm probably the worst, but I'll let you do it. And then we can just like make it seem like,
no, I mean, you're still doing sprints. You have to go to the weight room. You have to eat well. Like, you have to you have to eat your vegetables in order to like go do the fun things you want to do. And that means building strong campaigns.
Yeah, no, for sure. It is always the infrastructure and the boring stuff. And I've told people a million times, especially in digital, like, everybody is always chasing the shiny object. And I'm like, look, at the end of the day, when it comes to digital, it is never the shiny object. Back in the day, it was like the viral video. And I'm like, listen, it is never the viral video that is doing it in digital. It is like that we are targeting a universe and following these like micro target. I mean, it's like the nerdy stuff, right? It's the stuff that you didn't want to pay attention to in school in digital that is actually making the difference. It is not the viral video, but I get it because it's much more fun and it's much more shiny. And we all love the shiny object, but it is
my favorite client question is, how do I make this video go viral?
Yes, you don't. And that is the answer, my friends. That is the secret sauce. And that is not the recipe for success that we answer. We can tell you guys that part. That's our big tip for the day. I will say though, one of the questions that I love to ask, because as Lucinda said, she is now runs a very successful, works as a partner in a very successful ad agency, Democratic ad agency. And so I really love to talk to people about the trans ad from the presidential campaign because it's all anyone can talk about. So it's kind of like that really was a viral, that was a viral video. There you go. But I know that I went to that postmortem after the fact, and the Trump campaign was like, that is why we won. And they love to say that. And what they do love to say, I think, is really that they went to unlikely voters and they sort of targeted them with messages that they thought would bombard them. And they also did it on mediums where they felt like we couldn't necessarily respond as easily. And so I think that the trans video was something too that like it hit home in a couple of different ways. And so I'm just curious what you thought the impact was and sort of your take on it, especially as
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I think as Democrats, I think one of our party's flaws is that we have this bad habit of kind of shying away from tough topics. Like tough topics come up and we kind of look at our shoes because we're not really sure. We don't want to piss off people on the left, and you don't want to bring the ire of the right. Like
Yeah.
it is pretty, it is a space where I think, look, I think our members and our candidates all want to be on the right side of history here. Like I worked at the LGBTQ Victory Fund. I was their political director. Trans rights, gay and lesbian rights have been under attack for decades. And they're not stopping. They're not stopping anytime soon. Republicans have found this trans issue that has some salience with some swing voters. And it's so gross that they are doing this. But I do believe that at our core, most Democrats want to be on the right side of history here and will do what's right. But somehow, by running that ad, bragging about that ad, they have twisted it to make it seem like Democrats are spending all of our time worried about trans people and passing bills for trans people. Like they've managed to somehow pin on us that this is how we're spending our time, when in fact, they are the people who ran the trans ad. They are the people bringing it up in state legislatures over and over. And most Republican state legislatures in the country, it came up inside of this 2025 legislative session. They are taking their eye off the ball. They are distracting us with like this like social issue, as they call it. Like we're the party of social issues, but somehow they're spending all their time doing it. I mean, we're so proud as a caucus. We elected Sarah McBride. She's the first trans member of the House Democratic Caucus of Congress, period. And in November, before all of the members were sworn in, you saw Republican Nancy Mace, passing or trying to put up resolutions to like prevent her from using the right bathrooms and how, like, it's crazy. What are we doing? You just ran a whole campaign saying we're not paying attention. You're taking your eye off the ball. How about, as a legislative body, we protect healthcare? How about we protect people's ability to buy their groceries? How about we actually do address the cost issues that are going on right now? And instead, they're spending their time running these ads, putting up these crazy bills. And meanwhile, cutting taxes for billionaires like Elon Musk on the backs of middle-class families. So I just think it's something that we need to be a little more forceful about calling them out on.
Yeah, and it's so heartbreaking. I actually, when I was at the Victory Fund, I heard Sarah McBride tell this story about how, I don't know if you heard this, but like she was talking about how they chased a woman into the bathroom who they thought was her, and they were like attacking this woman who was not her, it was not Sarah McBride, and they're like, get out, get out, get out. And she's like, it was a woman. It was a woman who just happened to have shoulder length brown hair. And she's like, so now we're at the point where we're just like, you don't look woman enough. And you don't look woman enough. You're like, I mean, right? You don't look like us. You don't act like you don't walk like us. So she's like, where does this end?
Yeah.
And where does this end? You don't look a woman enough. That's now what we're paying attention to, instead of like the cost of groceries, which was supposed to go down. Right. Instead, eggs are like the cost of a small car. It's like, right? Like people couldn't dye eggs at Easter because they were literally like, you wouldn't want to waste that,
giant potatoes.
Right? That's That's right. But it's like insanity. And yet we're chasing this person into the bathroom because you don't look woman enough. Like
It's
what?
horrible. Yeah.
It was so insane and hypocritical and awful to me and so heartbreaking. But when she told this story, it's like, again, we're back to this heartbreak, which is the only word I can think of every time, because I think Doge is like, there's nothing more heartbreaking than the ironicness of this. This is efficiency, and these people, they're being double paying, and there's no cancer research. I mean, it's like every single time I'm like, I cannot.
100%.
Just so awful. The reason I sort of wanted to talk a little bit more, dig a little more into this about ads is because I do digital, you do traditional ads, and we work together and we do this in so many different ways because I think how we get the message out. So much of what we've been talking about too is like misinformation, and we get at this, right? Like, I think what you were saying too is that we didn't respond, right? Like, because we let that message sit there a little bit because it wasn't getting back, and then the media isn't responding in the same traditional sense. So like, I think that means we need to be listening. And like, so we think traditionally we got to respond on social media as well, and we got to have digital, but I think it also does leave room. And I'm sure, this is from you. I'm sure that means that that's really still an opportunity, that the ads are just as important, but we need to make response ads and like be there with those, and have those out there and be really direct. I think those are types of ads you guys make and that you do. Yeah, that those are the kinds of things that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, I think our media environment is so splintered. So you see, I mean, I know when I scroll through my social media, it is so tailored to me.
Yeah.
And it really does emphasize this kind of bubble we all live in. And it makes it hard to imagine what other people's bubbles are saying.
Right.
And so it does put the onus on Taryn and I as ad makers and buyers to make sure we're getting eyeballs on our content, which, is oftentimes rebuttals. Oftentimes it's just our story. Oftentimes it's attacks on and trying to inform people about the records of our opponents. And so that is something that is a lot harder now than it was 20 years ago. And that's not hard to imagine. We all, we sit on our phones in front of our TVs and we scroll and we watch TV differently with different streaming services. And there are cord cutters now. So it does make it harder, right?
Yeah.
But it is really important that we, I think, respond and make sure we're responding in the right spaces. So I know there is this like, TV's dying. 50% of people still have traditional TV and cable. 50% of people in this country, right? So we cannot just cut this off. We cannot just say like, okay, we're just not going to talk to them. And you have half of people who are so-called cord cutters. That's what we would call someone that cancels their cable and maybe has only streaming services, but that can also make up kind of YouTube TV, Sling, Hulu TV. And that's the Venn diagram between Taryn's and my work, right? Yeah. Like there is a giant Venn diagram of folks who are cord cutters who need to be delivered streaming services, ads on streaming services, and they need to see the content that we're putting out there. And they need to see the content that we're putting out on traditional linear television, right? So I think it's not out of the realm of possibility in a household for someone to get up and watch the Today Show in the morning and then click on Hulu and, try to watch programs that have ad interruptions inside. So it's important that we are, making sure that we're creating really good and impactful content and delivering it to the right people.
Yeah. And I think the data actually is imperfect. And so it's not just important, to your point, that it's getting there, but it's also that it's getting to the right person, because the truth is that's a television that's shared. And so there's different people in that household who might be watching. And we should make sure that that person gets that message, because sometimes we micro target. And you know what? Good old fashioned, TV commercials that used to come on when a family was watching can influence sometimes. And we can get that message out and it can influence someone. Sometimes they need to be persuaded. We don't need to just have this curated message. Sometimes we can persuade someone who we might not think we could have. So I love the idea that like good old fashioned commercials can persuade someone we might not think we can. So we shouldn't just assume, we shouldn't just assume that we can only turn the mind of some person. Like, I just think that sometimes, Barack Obama appealed to a lot of people who we didn't think he was going to appeal to. So I sometimes love the idea that there is hope that we can persuade other people's minds, especially because geography has become this like settled in our minds that there's a divide between this part of the country and this part of the country. And I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think where I grew up, in Virginia, some people just made assumptions about that, but I was more Northern Virginia than Southern, and even that part in this. And I just don't think it has to be that way. And I'm just curious. I know a little bit about your background, but tell me a little bit about growing up and how you think that influenced you, and maybe why that drove you into politics or didn't. I'm kind of curious about that with you.
Yeah. So I grew up in El Paso, Texas. It is the very tippity west point of Texas. And it is a giant metro
Very good
community.
food there if no one's been there.
Sorry, say that again.
I said very good food there if you haven't been there.
Hit me up. I'll send you all the rest.
Yeah.
So it's a border community. And so El Paso has about 700,000 people in it. And it's a shared border community with Juarez, Mexico. And there are over 1 million people in that kind of metro area. So my parents were teachers. I didn't grow up in a particularly political household by any means. But George W. Bush was our governor when I was growing up. And he was road testing No Child Left Behind in Texas schools. And so I certainly obviously kind of knew what that meant as a student. Not really. I mean, if we're being honest, no, I didn't. I was a kid who like cared about, going to band on time and like getting good at like French horn. But I could feel the pressures of it from my parents and the conversations my parents had. So I think that's one piece that really influenced me and helped me get involved. And, the other thing I would say, we were talking earlier about Democrats kind of looking at their shoes and not tackling tough issues. I grew up in a border community, and folks who follow me on social media know that a lot of my charitable giving, I give to the Rescue Mission of El Paso and I give to Annunciation House. It is a community where it is an entry point for a lot of migrants who are coming to America to look for a better life. And those two organizations service migrants who are in need of shelter, food, housing. And what I know, there's all this like ugly Republican rhetoric of like, the border, the crisis, it's a war zone. And I've literally met people who are like, oh my God, you must have grown up in a war zone. It is a crazy thing to say. Like my El Paso is a giving, loving El Paso. And when somebody reaches out their hand, we reach down and we pull them up. And so, I think you can be a Democrat who believes in a full pathway to citizenship and believes in a secure border. And you can say that with a straight face. And those are not the ideas who are at odds with each other. And so I think that definitely has shaped me and helped me talk to my candidates about immigration. And it's going to come up in every congressional race in the country this year. So you have to be ready to talk about it. And I think that certainly helped me over the years.
Absolutely. It's wonderful. And I got goosebumps when you said it because it's so true. I love that. I think that one of the other things that I would be remiss if we didn't chat a little bit about, because I know you certainly felt it. I know that I felt it over the years. It's just being a woman in politics and being a political operative. It's certainly hard. I'm sure. Donna Brazil and some of the folks before us whose shoulders we've stood on would say it too. But it's certainly a challenge for a lot of reasons. I always say being in tech and digital also is like always a little bit extra. It's a little extra there too. But I'm just, any advice you might have if somebody was thinking about it now, going into it, or anybody who's going through it, because I think we're still all going through it, that you might have for somebody.
Yeah, we are. And I'm sure you've had this experience, Taryn. I feel like certainly my own imposter syndrome has reared its ugly head throughout my career. And I think that the top question I get from young women coming up in this business is like, how do I get through this imposter syndrome? How do I do this? I'm actually one of the coaches for the Blue Leadership Collaborative, which is this awesome organization run by the Zinc Collective that helps make sure that we're diversifying our manager core. And so, when I started managing, there were very few women doing that work. And Blue Leadership Collaborative is helping women, LGBTQ people come up and manage, Black, Brown, AAPI. Like, it is a wonderful, wonderful organization that's helping really diversify the folks who are our future leaders. And it is critical to our work. So, I think the main question I get from folks, especially inside that program, is like, how do I get through this imposter syndrome? And I wish there was like an easy answer to that, but the best answer I've come across was from Shonda Rhimes. Love her. Take me to Shondaland any day. A few years ago, she wrote a book called The Year of Yes, for those of you that have read it. And she has this section about imposter syndrome where she says the way you get through it is that you earn it. And there is nothing more true. You have to stand up and you have to practice and you have to try and you have to learn your craft so that you can be sitting at the head of the table running the meting. And sometimes you're going to fall down in the meeting and scratch your knee, and that's okay. That's okay. You get back up and then you're stronger next time. And that really resonated with me because I feel like it has been my experience that no one was going to hand you or I anything or any responsibility that we didn't fight for. And so, you really gotta earn it. You gotta make your way there.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I have told everyone shameless self-promotion is not a bad thing and you need to be good at it.
Right.
And I will say, God bless Brian Wolf, but he told me a long time ago that I was really good at doing my job and I needed to put my head up. And I was like, what? He's like, you keep your head down all the time. You need to get your head up and like start talking about it. And, I remember I like thought, oh, I know what you mean. Like, I just was like really busy doing the job. And if you're really busy doing the job, you're not talking about how you're doing the job.
That's right.
That's right. You need to tell people that you're doing the job. Yeah. So people need to know that. And that's the shameless self-promotion. Especially if you're going to run a business, you have to be able to tell folks that you're doing a great job. That's kind of the battle. And that's why candidates and elected officials are really good at that. And that is part of winning races, which we were talking about the off year, right? Like they have to talk about their accomplishments and they forget that sometimes too. I feel like that's been so much of what I've been talking about with my electeds right now. I'm like, you have to tell them what you did. It's great that you're doing the work right now, but you actually have to tell them all the great things you're doing. You gotta tell them about all the things you're doing.
You do.
Right now, everybody's angry.
Nobody's going to know otherwise. You don't get, just because you got an A in class doesn't make you don't get credit for that, actually.
Yeah, you got to put the bumper sticker on the back of your car that you have a kid on the honor roll. Right? Like, you got to do it. Yeah. All right. So my last and final thing to you, I want to know what your prediction is for 2026. I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna put you on the line. Just one. You don't have to have like.
Look, we're gonna win the House, Taryn. We're gonna win the House, and I think we're gonna win some awesome gubernatorial seats. Most of the gubernatorial map is up this cycle, which we haven't talked about.
Yeah, there's a lot of gubernatorial.
Episode.
Yeah.
But I feel optimistic about that. I think we saw 2 special elections happen in super red seats in Florida. We just saw a Wisconsin Supreme Court race. Right. In that we won that Supreme Court race by a significant margin. And our candidate won in really tough places in Wisconsin. Listen, we were never going to win those Florida seats. They are R plus 30 seats, but picking up 15 points is huge. Good. And so if we can do that in seats that are down 10, seats that are down 5, we're going to be incredibly successful. And that gives me hope because we have to put a check on this president. And the House is our best way to put a check on him.
100%. I love it. I like this prediction. And I agree with you. And my big thing was that they had these town halls and people were like throwing at them. And I likened it to like 2010, like because it was the downfall for us on the other side, right?
Yes. The Tea Party,
like the bad side. Yes. And I was like, and everyone's like, oh, but the Democrats, they don't have a message. And I'm like, neither did the Republicans. And we lost a lot of seats.
Right.
So let's see it the reverse.
Yeah, exactly. What's your prediction, Taryn? Give it to me.
I think we're going to win the House. I agree with you there. And I actually think that we could do very well, like across the board. Like we could really, really do well because my hope is that they are overconfident and I want them to keep being overconfident and just let's under the radar. They think that we're a mess. Let them think we're a mess. That's fine. I was like, in fact, guys, don't be unified. Because it turns out when 2024 and we were all unified and like, we're going to pull this together, they didn't like that. So just like, let them think we're a mess, and under the radar, we're just going to slide on by.
Let's do it. Let's do it. I can't wait.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And like I said, next time we'll do this with wine or, something.
Yes,
coffee,
please.
some kind of, cocktail, something very mature.
Thank you so much for having me, Taryn. This was fun.
Thanks for listening to Political Trail Mix. Make sure to follow and review wherever you get your podcast, and stay connected with me on Instagram and YouTube. Let's keep this conversation going.